Hey y'all. Before I get into the video, I just want to ask you all to please hit that like button. Hitting that like button really helps the YouTube algorithm suggest the video for other people who want to watch it. It helps with viewership of the channel, and overall it helps me know that I'm doing a really good job and you all appreciate the content I'm creating. It takes a lot of time to make videos like this, condensing screen recordings down to a more tangible time frame. So please do like this video, and if you really like the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Now with that being said, let's get into it. Hey guys, so let me kind of explain what's going to go on in this video. So recently I started designing a PCB based off of a previous PCB I designed for another kit, specifically the Mino kit. If you haven't heard of the Mino, I'm going to leave a link to the video down in the description for typing tests so you can check that out. But essentially the Mino was a PCB I designed, and I want to design another PCB kind of inspired by it. So like I briefly mentioned, this project kind of was inspired by a previous one, but I had to make a lot of architecture changes. And one of the primary reasons is the original Mino PCB was supposed to be compatible with both QMK and ZMK and a variety of microcontrollers. So that limited things like I could do with I/O and things like that. However, with this design, I'm going to ditch the Atmel based compatibility and I want to move straight over to STM32. So there are literal dozens and maybe even hundreds of differences between STM processors and Atmel processors, but the biggest difference and the reason why I'm changing is because of the need for more I/O pins. There aren't as many I/O pins on Atmel microcontrollers as there are on STM microcontrollers. After I decided on using STM32, I decided on using the Joker template from the Akron project. So the Akron project is a collection of open source tools for designing mechanical keyboard PCBs. And the Joker template specifically is a fraction of the project that essentially helps you bootstrap developing a board based on the STM32 architecture. The reason I'm using it is because I kind of want to take advantage of the templating idea of it, which is you can change the microcontroller without having to completely redesign your board, and you should be okay. This will help defend against things like chip shortages and other supply shortages in the future. When using the template, there are literal dozens of considerations, but Gondo, the developer of Akron project and also the main contributor to the Joker template, has all sorts of details and documentation written on the Akron project's website. So I'll link that down below. He also has a very active Discord if you have any questions there as well. So I recommend asking in there. So now that I've kind of gone over the basics of the why and the how, I'm kind of going to go into my actual experience with the project so far and how the development of the PCB is going. So I started by using the project generation tool that comes with the Joker template library. So essentially what it does is it sets up all the libraries for you in KiCad, and it also does some other things like copying in some components, so that way you can kind of just drop into your schematic and have a lot of the things already set up for you. With so much already set up for me, I was able to just go directly into setting up my rows and columns for my switches. And I decided to go ahead and add labels to them to the microcontroller. I changed a lot of these later, but I just like it for completeness sake. It really helps. After I finished with the switch matrix, I then added the wiring for the OLED. And then after that, we just quickly moved on to the actual PCB component placement. I started the component placement by importing a DXF of my keyboard outline. This helps me serve as a guide, which I find is incredibly useful considering the snap features in KiCad are not very good. So this really helps making sure that everything stays in alignment as I develop my PCB and I don't have issues later on. So this time I did have trouble importing the files. I think this was because I wanted some of the components to be on the edge cuts layer, but I wanted some to be on the user drawings layer just for guides and reference. So this caused a lot of issues. Eventually I was able to get everything imported into KiCad properly, and then I was able to start aligning my switches. So because I had the guides on every single switch, I don't actually generally start on one particular switch like I know a lot of designers do, because it's fairly easy for me to align them this way, and I kind of prefer it. Once I finished with the switches, I paired them with their respective diodes, and then I got to move on to the really interesting part, placing the rest of the SMD components. So this is where I had to get really creative. You see, due to the way the Mino line is designed, I had these tabs on either side of the PCB, and I wanted to use that for the remainder of the SMD components. That way they weren't going to conflict with anything else already put on the PCB in the main sections where I was routing the rows and the columns for the switch matrix. So it doesn't look like it would cause a problem kind of here, but it actually did involve quite a bit of routing later and quite a bit of wiring, so that way it didn't look like a complete mess. And I definitely overestimated or underestimated how difficult it would be cramming so many S&D components in one spot. So in a future revision, I'm probably going to break out some of those components, or at least change the placement so that way it's a little bit neater overall. After I finished routing the components around the MCU, I actually realized that I forgot two major things. One, I forgot a reset circuit, and two, I forgot the USB connector itself. So I quickly popped back into my schematic, wired everything up in that diagram, and then I imported the changes back into the PCB editor, placed them, and I was all good to go after that. Finally, I started wiring the rows and columns to the switches themselves. So this was really important because I really wanted this to be aesthetically pleasing, so I really did take my time and put a lot of thought into how I was going to wire them. So I wanted to wire the rows and columns sort of like a bus, so that way it kind of made a really nice aesthetic when you looked across the PCB. And eventually I opened the renderer, took a look, and the routing was starting to look pretty good. So at this point, I was able to move on to the design rule checker. So for those of you who might not know, the design rule checker is essentially this sort of sanity bit that's involved in KiCad, and it kind of just helps you make sure that you're not making ridiculous electrical mistakes. So kind of like a component isn't placed off the board improperly, silkscreen doesn't look illegible, or something isn't connected. This was actually the worst part of developing this board, because when I opened the DRC, I had hundreds of issues. Specifically, I think it was over 365 issues. This was immense. Like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, wow, I'm never gonna be able to get through all these. I'm just gonna quit. But I realized that a lot of these issues actually weren't caused by me. They were caused with components that I was using in the PCB design itself. So I don't know if this was an issue with my KiCad version kind of being incompatible with some of the Acron libraries, or rather it was the opposite way around, or maybe I just messed up something when I was opening the template. But either way, a lot of the errors were false, and so I got to focus on the things that were in my control and things I actually did cause issues with. So like, I had forgotten a couple connections, I had some silkscreen overlapping, and a few little things here and there. So once I worked out all those issues, I was done with the design rules checker, and then I was able to go ahead and start exporting all my files, and I sent them off to a fabricator to create them. As of the filming of this video, I actually have received the prototypes for the first PCB. Now I'm not going to go over all the details in this video. I'm going to leave that for a future one. So if you really like this video, hit that like button. If you like the channel, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.